Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals, we're into the home stretch as far as this year of politics. I think people need to understand how important it is to vote. It does no good to have regrets after the election and say, I should have gotten out there and I should have voted. Shoulda, woulda, and coulda means nothing. I know that some people are disheartened about politics. They don't like politicians, but if you don't like any of them, you dislike some of them less than you dislike the others. So, go out, and for black people especially, this is a golden opportunity that will come once in a lifetime. Not to elect a black person, that was President Obama. But remember, Trump and his people said that Obama should not be allowed to run because he was not an American. His name, he had mixed parentage, but he was born in America, and he was more American than Trump. Trump has done things that undermine the Constitution, the laws, and he's a liar. How do you know when he's lying? Whenever his lips are moving. He'll tell lies that can be exposed very easily. He was saying that Biden and the federal government and the Democrats were holding up aid to those people in the Florida area where the tornadoes, the typhoons, whatever they call them, are devastating the countryside. Floods, people being without a place to stay. Some are drowning. And Trump, even though the news media will show that he's lying, will lie. He came up with this statement that Haitians, who are black people from Haiti, obviously, in a town in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, were eating the neighbors' cats and dogs. The mayor and all of the public officials were outraged. They said, this is a lie. First of all, in that town, they were just beginning to be a manufacturing entity, and they didn't have enough workers. When the Haitians came, and they're here legally, they saved the economy of that city. They have started businesses of their own. They are not criminals. They are model citizens, but Trump can tell any lie he wants to, and these white people swallow it. And now we've got some Negroes. That's what I call these so-called black men who think that Trump is going to do something for them, and he turns his back and betrays his own white people. What is there that any young black man has that Trump wants other than a vote? He was president 4 years. He was as racist could be. Nobody could run for office and be taken seriously who had sexual misconduct, convictions in court. He's been convicted running for president. And these young Negroes running around talking about he's a great guy and they're going to vote for him. And the idiotic white people, they know better. Not only that, there are records of him having hired black people when he had a little money. He's broke now. He wouldn't pay them. We have been fools, and we need to open our eyes. We need to clear our nostrils, and as they say, smell the coffee. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And the difference between Kamala and Barack, obviously, is that she is a woman. Our mothers were women. This woman was a prosecutor. She was the friend and protector of victims. She did not bring false charges against anybody. Nobody accused her of being an overzealous prosecutor. She was fair. She applied the law, and she applied it without fear or favor. If somebody was brought in by the police, and the evidence was shaky, there was no prosecution. She was elected the Attorney General of California. She was in the U.S. Senate. And this, I'm not going to call him a cracker, because I don't want to offend the people who are called that, because he would be a shame to them even. He said she did not even acknowledge being black. He said she discovered that when she decided to run for president. He didn't realize she had gone to a black college. He didn't realize that she had joined a black sorority. Everybody in California, everybody who knew about her, realized that she was a black woman. Some of her ancestry is Indian, in the country of India. We, as black people, don't know who is crawling around in the branches of our family trees. There are some black people called black because they identify themselves that way, but they could go to a Ku Klux Klan meeting and nobody would bother them based on their complexion. So this silliness that white people swallow should not infect us. He has a judgment against him for the way he lied about this woman and defamed her that he cannot pay. If he's a rich man that he claims, why can't he pay it? He hasn't got money. This man is a convicted felon. He violated federal law when he stole those documents from the White House. You don't accidentally walk away with that much classified material. But white people say, well, they're after Trump, they ought to be after him. He is as close to a scoundrel, a scallywag, a carpetbagger as I can think of, but I wouldn't call him any of those because I would be defaming all of those. Suppose I had convictions of felonies on my record. I couldn't run for the legislature. And he'll get up there with his ugly self, and he'll say, she's ignorant, she's dumb, she doesn't know anything. She knows more in her little fingernail than he knows in his whole head, and her little fingernail doesn't know anything. But at any rate, my saying these things is not going to make people change their mind. It's not going to make our Uncle Toms change their conduct. But if I'm going to speak at all, I'm going to speak what I believe and am convinced is the truth without fear or favor. I was one of the most hated people in this state when I was in the legislature, but I was also one of the most respected. When the farmers found out during the farm crisis that I knew more about the farm problems than they did. See, they were just rolling along, plowing, going into debt, borrowing more than they could pay, and the bankers would foreclose and take their property, take their equipment. They didn't know what was going on around them. You know why I knew so much? I can read. I understand English. And just incidentally, I have a law degree, but I read a tremendous amount of history. I read the newspaper. I watch the news. And I don't use any of the high-tech electronic gadgets, the old-fashioned way. It may take me a little longer, but I get there, and I see more along the way as I travel there. And people develop a fear of me. Not because I'm going to give somebody a knuckle sandwich. Some of them would rather I go upside the head with a fist than to whip them verbally in the way that I did. Is this boasting? If that's what you want to call it that. I call it not acting, but facting. And our situation is too serious and grave for us to be running around here talking about we're going to support Trump and you're not going to support Kamala Harris. I'm running as a write-in candidate. If you want to vote for me, you will see when you get to the legislature on the ballot, District 11, the name of the current person in office will have his name there. But there is a line below that. That's where, if you want to vote for me, you write my name, you can print it, spell it correctly. And then there's a little square next to my name, and you put an X in it. You have to write my name or print it on the line, then check the box next to it. And we'll see what we shall see. And we won't know until the last ballot is counted. And as I always told people, the legislature was neither my wife nor my life. It was something that I did. While being in the legislature, I was given tools with which to work that I didn't have as a non-member. And I used those tools to help the people who were on the outside, the unpeople, the non-people, those who had no friends, those who had nowhere to turn, anybody who had an issue that fell within the area of what it was that I promised to deal with as a senator. I would help them. And mine went beyond just what technically a senator or any politician is expected to do. I genuinely accepted as my measuring stick how would I want to be treated if I were situated as this person is being treated. Would I want somebody to look down their nose at me? Would I want them to treat me like I'm a dog who would eat scraps? I don't have a name. I'm a hey you or boy or some term that would degrade me even further. When people don't have things, they feel badly enough already. Why will we kick somebody who is down? Why will we act that somebody who has been dealt a bad hand had that bad hand because they did something wrong? And if they did something wrong, from my standpoint, it's not for me to correct them. My job is similar, this is an analogy, to the way a doctor operates. If a person is brought to the hospital and comes to the emergency ward, seriously injured, the doctor doesn't say, by the way, what political party you belong to? What church do you go to? Where do you work? Are you married to somebody of your own race? Are you a queer? Are you a faggot? Or do you belong to that LGBTQ plus community? Look, all of those are tack-ons. Everybody born of a man and woman has a basic human dignity. And that dignity should be respected. We degrade ourselves when we degrade somebody who needs help and we look the other way. I was not able to do that. And I would be criticized for it. But I didn't go into the legislature to please people. Everything I did was an open book. If they didn't like it, I would tell them. I used to do a program on Cox, and the mayor and Ben Gray and some of those people didn't like the way I talked, and they got that program, it was Channel 2, shut down. Did that make me an enemy of theirs, an enemy to them? Well, they might have been enemies to me. But if one of them needed help, I mean genuinely, and I could provide that help, I would give it. A friend of mine said, "You mean you'd help Ben after what he did to you?" And I'm not going to tell you all of that. Some people know. I said, yes, I'd help him, but I'd help him with my back to the wall. That keeps you from being stabbed in the back. We should be, as the Bible says, as wise as a serpent, yet as harmless as a dove. There's a song that Rod Stewart sings, Forever Young, and I wish I could remember it. It says something like, may the good Lord be with you down every road you roam. May sunshine and happiness follow you when you're far from home. And anyway, he's telling this person to do unto others as you would have done to you. And whatever road you choose, I'm right behind you, win or you lose. Forever young, forever young, forever young. We know how we want to be treated. And when you've done the best that you can, that's when you, as I term it for myself, I can lay my head on my pillow at night and sleep the sleep of the just. If somebody says I'm an easy mark, I'm a fool, they can say whatever they want to. Words don't mean much to me. What other people think doesn't mean much to me. I do not do what I do to please people. I do what I do to please me. Now, and then I'm going to read a couple of things. There was a woman named Moms Mabley. She was a comedian, one of the funniest people I ever saw in my life. She'd wear these long house dresses or house coats, had combat boots, and she talked like she got something stuck in her throat all the time. She said, I went to this crazy house, and I saw all these crazy people around there, and I was getting ready to go up the stairs, and this old crazy man moved aside, excuse me, so I could go by. And then when I came back down, he's still there. So he said, hey, come over here. I said, man, what you want? He said, come over here and put your ear against that wall and listen. And make sure he didn't do nothing to me because he's crazy. I put my ear against the wall, and I said, man, I don't hear nothing. And he looked at me and he said, and it been like that all day. And she had a way of bringing things that would have a deeper message than just what she was saying, but she was hilarious. Now, I said I'm going to have something to read, maybe a couple of things, but let me start, because people ask me what I ever did while I was in the legislature. They obviously didn't read the newspaper, but this is a resolution that the legislature adopted after I left the last time, and this is what it says. Whereas Senator Ernie Chambers concluded his very distinguished career in the Nebraska unicameral legislature on January 6, 2021, and whereas Senator Ernie Chambers was first elected to the legislature in 1970 and has served continuously since then with one constitutionally imposed 4-year hiatus. That's the 4 years I had to sit out because of term limits. And whereas Senator Chambers has represented Legislative District Number 11 honestly, fearlessly, and well. And whereas Senator Ernie Chambers is the longest-serving state senator in Nebraska history, and nobody can equal that now because of term limits. And whereas Senator Ernie Chambers has enacted more meaningful, just, and compassionate laws than any resolution under 100 pages in length could possibly record. And whereas Senator Chambers authored many important bills, including bills which abolished the death penalty, required district elections at the county, city, and school board level, divested or made the state drop Nebraska investments from the apartheid government in South Africa, returned Native American artifacts held by the state of Nebraska to the Native American people, restored family rights through the Nebraska Indian Child Welfare Act, established a DNA new trial right that didn't exist, that helped to free and exonerate the Beatrice Six. They were convicted of first-degree murder and they were innocent. Established the learning community to help eliminate disparity in public education resources, and protected the environment and wildlife living in Nebraska. If you want to see a concrete example of what my work for the learning community did, go down to 24th and Franklin on the southwest corner, and you'll see that structure. People don't know that I did all of these things because I didn't say it. A lot of people don't read the newspaper, but let me continue. He helped eliminate disparities in public education resources. The rich white schools were better taken care of than ours, and protected the environment and wildlife living in Nebraska, and established a publicly funded and medically approved diet for kids on welfare. You know why I did that? A lady called me and her little boy was sick. And she said, he stays sick because I don't have enough money to buy good food, so he eats a lot of beans and macaroni and spaghetti and things that I can get a lot of with the little money I have, but they make him sicker. When the legislature broke for noon, I went to the governor and I told him about this. And I said, I'm going to do something. And he said, well, what do you want to do, Ernie? We were on a first name basis. Guy's name was Exon. I said, we have to make sure that when families are in this situation, the little money they get to buy food is going to get food other than that kind that will make the child sicker. Starches and other unhealthful substances. He said, if you get that bill to my desk this session, I will sign it. I don't let grass grow under my feet. I didn't just do the research, I didn't have time. I talked to medical people. They indicated the kind of foods that sick children, like this little boy would need essentially. That means necessarily. It's not something that's like a treat. And I got the bill drafted. I got some technical assistance, and I got it to the governor's desk, and he signed it. People don't even know that. And some of them may have a child or know somebody with a child who benefited from it. But when I got these bills done, I would go to the next thing and not talk about it. I'd even forgotten about that. But let me continue. Whereas Senator Ernie Chambers set a standard for honest, fearless, selfless, intelligent, and informed public service that will inspire future generations and teach such generations how to serve and preserve our democratic state. Now, that might not include any of the people living now, but I'm in history books, whether you know it or not just in Nebraska, but in other parts of the country. In the 4th grade history book that's used in this state, I'm in it. What I did to get this state to take its money out of companies that invest in South Africa, and other legislators saw what I did, black ones, they did the same thing. And in South Africa, the important people said that's going to start a bandwagon effect, and pretty soon we're going to be in trouble because without these states investing their money over here, we're in trouble. Well, that's exactly what happened. In the South African, the racist government collapsed. Nelson Mandela was elected president. Nelson Mandela knew who I was. Well, I am. Now I'm not going to go into a whole lot of, I was mistreated, gave a speech at the University of Nebraska the university snubbed me. I was not invited because I was fighting against the university because of the way they discriminated against black students. I got a scholarship that would apply to needy black students. Then the white people, when they found out about it, there was a professor, he said, we shouldn't have this. So they got a constitutional amendment that said there could not be what they call affirmative action. Now, being less than 10% of the population, how many jobs are black people who are discriminated against going to take from white people? That's what happens. I'm aware of these things, and I'd be down there fighting alone. Ministers didn't come. Teachers didn't come. The public hours didn't come, even if they knew they didn't have a way to get there. But that's why they sent me. They sent me because they knew what I would do. They knew I had something in my head, and they knew I was fearless. I was relentless, and I'm not going to let anybody frighten me and make me shut up. If they tried to make me shut up, I talk louder. And then I tell them, you can say what you want, but don't put your hands on me. I didn't run from the police. I ran to and after the police, and I've got the records to show it. But I also have an arrest record longer than Jesse James. But if I was convicted, I couldn't have gotten in the legislature. I was falsely arrested numerous times, one time on the steps of the barbershop for looking at a cop. And I've got the record to prove it. That went to trial. The judge dismissed it. But that's just some of what I went through. And that's why I know what happens to black people, because it happened to me. But I was not a whiner. I was not a crier. I was not a complainer about what happened to me. But I would do whatever was necessary that was in my power to help us, and I helped those of us who couldn't stand me. I didn't go to church, but I didn't do anything against people who do. It's up to them to live their life the way they feel they ought to. I'm not a judger or a divider over people. But I know what I promised to do when I gave that promise when I first got in the legislature, and I did it better than anybody else. And the records are there to prove it. One lobbyist was so impressed with the things that I said. Every word that we speak in debate is recorded and then typed. He had, with his own money, every word that I said during a given session of the legislature. He got all of the transcriptions of the debates in which I participated and had a book published. He said, something ought to be out there if the public wants it, that will show how many issues you discussed, how prepared you were, how you ran rings around them with their own rule book. I got judges disciplined when they violated their own ethics because I knew more about their ethics than they did because I read the law that set out their ethics. I wasn't down there with cap pistols or an unloaded gun, just to use an example that people who are crazy about guns would understand. But with me, they feared my loaded brain more than they did a loaded gun. They wished that I would have come against them with a gun. But let me continue here. Paul, who wrote things in the Bible, had talked about boasting, and he said, well, let me boast. And then he began to talk about the things he had done. This is what is a matter of public record forever. Whereas Senator Ernie Chambers set a standard of honest, fearless, selfless, intelligent, and informed public service that will inspire future generations and teach such generations how to serve and preserve our democratic state. And whereas Senator Ernie Chambers personified principle that, quote, the salvation of the state is watchfulness in the citizen, unquote. And whereas Senator Ernie Chambers now returns to the realm of private citizenship, having made an inestimable contribution to our community, state, and nation, and to the world. Now therefore be it resolved by the members of the 107th Legislature of Nebraska, first session, 1, that the legislature thanks Senator Ernie Chambers for his service to the legislature in the state of Nebraska and congratulates him on his incredible career of public service to the people of this state, and that a copy of this resolution be delivered to Senator Ernie Chambers. Now, I had nothing to do with writing that. Here is something which you cannot see, but what it says is, Chambers, legislature's King Cobra. And here's what I wrote, a little rhyme about the legislators. They fear the cobra and also me. They need not fear either when letting us be. Then here's something that says in a paragraph. It's an editorial from the Lincoln Journal-Star. Chambers rewrote the system. The book on Senator Ernie Chambers' achievements in changing state laws has a plenitude of entries. Few, though, will exceed Chambers' successful championing of district elections against potent establishment resistance for all members of the Omaha City Council, the Omaha Board of Education, and the Douglas County Board. All were elected at large BC before Chambers. None are to be that way now. The Journal, that's the Lincoln Journal-Star in Lincoln, the Journal's opinion remains that a combination at-large and district mix is a better overall system for local jurisdictions. So even though I did it in a way that they would not have preferred, they could see the value of what I did. This is an editorial, Sprint Answers Call. This was written in the Lincoln Star paper from 1995. Thanks to the pugnacious State Senator Ernest Chambers, about 11,000 Nebraska telephone customers can collect calls from people who use Sprint as their long-distance carrier. Sprint had put a block on some people so they couldn't collect calls. In other words, people could have a child away at school, couldn't call home collect because Sprint had blocked their phones. Last year, Chambers filed an official complaint with the Nebraska Public Service Commission after learning that Sprint had blocked collect calls to his office for no apparent reason. Sprint could not come up with a reason for the block. The Chambers fussing uncovered a small can of Sprint worms, thousands of other customers with similar unaccountable blocks on their phones. Quote, obviously, your involvement benefited numerous people across the state, unquote, said a letter to Chambers from the commission. Sprint subsequently agreed to lift all of the blocks, more than 10,900 of them. Now, a Nebraska ET can call home, even collect, no matter what long-distance companies are involved, thanks to Ernie Chambers. Then, here's an editorial that was from the other Lincoln paper, Chambers Sprints to the Rescue. Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha was not alone when Sprint placed a block on his Capitol phone, so he couldn't collect calls. After Chambers objected, the State Public Service Commission asked how many other blocks Sprint had placed on the phones of unwitting customers for no reason. The answer, nearly 11,000. Yet another example of how Chambers helps the little guy. And some people in this community of mine say, what did you ever do? They don't read the paper. Get this, my brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals. This was from an editorial in the Omaha World Herald. Chambers to stay at Capitol in name. State Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha will be leaving the Nebraska Legislature soon, but a remembrance of him will remain in the Capitol. The hearing room where he spent much of his 38-year legislative career was renamed Wednesday for him. I'm the only living person who ever had anything named after him or her in that Capitol building, the only one. A standing room only crowd filled the Judiciary Committee hearing room, now the Ernie Chambers hearing room, for a ceremony to honor Chambers and to unveil a new name plaque above the entrance. Quote, "This is not the fanciest committee hearing room in the state capitol," said Speaker Mike Flood of Norfolk, who is now a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. "But it's where Senator Chambers has done a lifetime of work, and his work has shaped the laws of this state and shaped the lives of Nebraskans." Chambers showed up in his trademark sweatshirt and jeans carrying Nicole, the white toy poodle belonging to his longtime aide, Cynthia Granberry. Among the crowd were his daughter, Gayla Chambers, grandchildren, Lauren and Blair Chambers, and his older sister, Nettie Johnson. Brenda Council, who will succeed Chambers in representing North Omaha's District 13, but it's District 11, was there. So were several current and former state senators, lobbyists, legislative staff, community members, and activists. Leila Shanks, a civil rights and anti-death penalty activist from Lincoln, listed some of Chambers' accomplishments. The most recent was the exoneration of 6 people convicted in a Beatrice woman's murder and rape. They were cleared because of a law Chambers sponsored that requires the state to test DNA evidence if it was unavailable at the time of a trial and could exonerate a defendant. Quote, "He has dedicated his life to the issues that affect the daily lives, the very living conditions of the downtrodden, the underdog, the disenfranchised, the helpless, the voiceless," she said. "He has sometimes seemed like a voice crying in the wilderness, but he never gave up," unquote. Our president-elect, Barack Obama, surely stands on the shoulders of the likes of Ernie Chambers, she said further. Term limits for forced retirement for the state's longest-serving senator. He won election last week to the Learning Community Council, where he will help oversee the implementation of an educational effort he helped to craft. Something else. Now, here's something that I get a kick out of. This was from the Lincoln Journal-Star in 2013. Chambers is legislative rock star. I may have read this before, but I have fun reading it. The Omaha senator came down the stairs, headed for his office during the lunch recess, and ran headlong into a clump of young admirers. It quickly turned into a squealing mob scene of elementary school students from St. Wenceslaus School in West Omaha, all surrounding Senator Ernie Chambers, posing for pictures with him, uniformed Catholic young ones chanting his name, "Ernie, Ernie, Ernie." One boy reportedly endorsed him for Pope. Not sure what touched off the aggregate adoration, but who, we ask, needs a rock star when you have the popular politician from North O? I didn't know those kids in West Omaha would think that about me, but you never know. So just be yourself. Trust your judgment. Don't let other people make decisions for you about your life and what you ought to do. Let it be where at night, when all is still, there may even be a little chill in the air, and you don't want that chill to run down your spine because you were spineless when you should have been stiff of spine, standing tall, and saying or do something that you knew you should have, but you didn't. But because you didn't stand up today doesn't mean you cannot overcome that and with resolve stand up tomorrow. Try to live each day in such a way that you can look at your own self. We all will have regrets on many occasions, but we don't have to live a regretful life. If we made an honest mistake, we can correct it. Nothing's wrong with having made a mistake. See, there's a difference between a mistake, which is an accidental misstep, and doing something intentionally. But even when you've done something intentionally to hurt somebody, you can go back and try to make amends. That's what being a human being should be. We don't act instinctually or from instinct like an animal. Excuse me. A lion will growl. A mouse will squeak. A bumblebee will buzz and sting. We are not locked in that way. We know when we've done something that we ought not to have done. We know when there's something we need to do. And that's how we ought to live our life. And I have many other things here that I could read. And there are things written about what I've done from people in other states. I was in a movie called A Time for Burning that was made by the Lutheran Church, and it sold I don't know how many hundred thousands of dollars worth of discs showing it, but there were editorials written about it all over the country, even some in Europe. And there was a scene in it with me and a preacher, and I stripped him, not to humiliate him, but he came to the shop, and I was honest with him. And if that scene were excised from that movie, there'd be no movie. It was nominated for an Oscar. I was invited to a ceremony and posed with this huge statue, gold-plated, I'm sure it wasn't gold, of Oscar, the little thing that they give people. And the reason I went was because the minister was going to be there. He subsequently died, and he was not an old guy. There is a group, I forget what they're called, and I've got it down here, but I don't have time to read it. And they wrote a song and put it on a disc and named the disc after something that I had done when I sued God. And people ask, why would I do that? Oh, here it is. Seattle, and I'm gonna run out of time. Seattle punk band releases Ernie Chambers versus God. Virgin Islands is a punk band from Seattle. Its debut album on Tuesday called, of all things, Ernie Chambers versus God. So how did a band from Washington come to do a politically charged record named after a Nebraska politician? The answer, Michael Jaworski, the band's singer, guitarist, and primary lyricist, was born and raised in Omaha before moving to Seattle 13 years ago. He's not lost his connection to his home state, nor his admiration for Chambers. Quote, Ernie Chambers is such an inspirational figure, Jaworski said. I've always been drawn to him as a political figure. He's kind of like the punk rock politician. He sticks up for people who don't have a voice. He's trying to make the world a better place in his eyes. I happen to agree with his approach. Virgin Island was formed, then it tells how they were formed, and they said that it had nothing to do with the lawsuit itself. That lawsuit was part of the inspiration, said Jaworski. There's a lot of frustration with the status quo. The right, meaning politicians, is getting more radical, and the left isn't as strong as it should be. Politicians aren't looking out for the best interests of the people. That's something Ernie has done over the years. It's definitely not a concept record or biographical piece about Ernie Chambers, but he had a lot to do with the thinking that's on it. Ernie Chambers versus God isn't just a political album. There's some cathartic punk releases among the 10 tracks that has nothing to do with any issue. And then he goes on to mention that he wasn't concerned about that lawsuit that I filed. He said people can dance to it. But he hopes Chambers appreciates its intent and might want to check out a show if Virgin Islands makes it to Nebraska later this summer. Until then, Ernie Chambers versus God is available at Homer's Music and these other places. So I have influenced other people by the way that I conduct myself, and they do not see things the way that I see them. They may not even agree with what I say and what I do, but they like the integrity that they perceive in me. And that's what I would like to have, and it's what I would offer everybody. And if you write my name in and send me back to the legislature, then I assure you, you're going to get the same quality of work that I had given for 46 years, longer than anybody else. And they say that I'm a cinch to enter the Nebraska Hall of Fame, but I won't know anything about that because you're not even eligible until 15 years after you've croaked. As the canary said when he found out that the door to his cage was unlocked, I'm out of here.
You've been watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to leave suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This is an EWC Communications production.